Hi, and welcome to Bible Study with Friends, where our goal is to show and grow a passion for studying God's Word. And today we're going to be talking about an interesting aspect of the life of Joseph in the book of Genesis. We're going to be talking about the wronged slave. And the episode, now, I don't know about you, but have you ever been wronged for doing something or for even not doing something, for being totally innocent, perhaps in your family or at your job? You've been wronged. And today we're going to talk about our reactions to a situation like that. And if you've been wronged, put it in your comments below. Tell us about it. And we're going to be talking about that when we come right back. Well, welcome back to Bible Study with Friends. I'm here with my friend Ricky Allison, and Ricky and I are continuing our overview of the book of Genesis. This is a real Bible study. There's no rehearsal, there's no script. This is what getting together with a friend for a Bible study looks like, and we're glad you've joined us and sit in with us today. We hope this is a blessing to you. If you'd like to know more about the Bible Study with Friends ministry, there's a website link in the description below, and we'd welcome you to come and take a look around, see how you can get involved. How you doing, Ricky?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you.
What we're going to basically cover today in the book of Genesis, in the story of Joseph, is from chapter 39 down to about chapter 42. And this is the episode where we see Joseph as the wronged slave.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens and what God does for Joseph during this period of time. And it's a significant period of time. Listen, let's turn to Genesis 39. And do me a favor, Ricky. Let's read through. Let's just read through from verse 1 to verse 23 like a narrative, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at this. But let's see the situation with the wronged slave. So go ahead from 39:1 to verse 23.
Now Joseph had been brought to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down from there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of the Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him an overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all he had. From the time that he had been made overseer in the house and all over, he had the Lord's blessings. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessings of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time the master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. But one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by the garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me and cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I had lifted up my voice and cried out, he left the garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." Then she laid up his garment by her until the master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you had brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out the house. And as soon as his master heard these words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed favor and steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that Joseph was in charge of because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. That was a big passage you had me read there.
Yeah, 23 verses. That was a lot there. But that is the story of the wronged slave, the story in Joseph's life. Now, as you read that, let's just talk about it. What jumped out at you? What things did you observe that were interesting things to you?
Well, it was interesting how many times it said, and the Lord was with him, and the Lord made him succeed, and he had favor with the Lord. And nobody was worried about Joseph, because they knew he had favor with the Lord. So, the Lord is definitely with Joseph in all that's going on.
Yeah, we can take that to heart, that the Lord is with us as believers. He is with us even in the midst of trouble, even in our darkest hour. The Lord is with us. There's a great verse in Deuteronomy. I'm going to have you read another verse, chapter 31, verse 6. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Well, what a blessing that is. Now, I want to give you some other verses that you can take for your own personal quiet time about this. That even in difficulties, even when God allows us to suffer in our lives, He is with us and will help us. It sounds interesting, but He will help us succeed while we're suffering. Yeah. And that's what He does with Joseph. But here are some other verses. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 27 to 31, Psalm 118, 5 through 9, and Hebrews chapter 13, 5 and 6. All of those verses talk basically about the idea that God will never desert us. He's always with us, even in the midst of difficult times. And I think that's one of the lessons we see with Joseph. Yeah. Even though he's wrongly accused, even though he's wrongly in jail, he succeeds. And one of the interesting things I saw about the success, he succeeds as Potiphar's slave. Then when he's thrown in prison, he succeeds as a prisoner. I don't know the inner workings of jail, but you wonder how many are in prisons. But you wonder today, do they put the prisoners in charge? Is that something that's done today? I mean, what an honor. I guess that shows you how much favor Joseph had with the Lord. That in a lot of prisons, I've spoken down in some prisons that have a Christian emphasis, that have a big chapel and a big chaplaincy ministry, a lot of Bible studies and that sort of thing. And those prisons that I've spoken at have trustees. Mm-hmm. Trustees are basically prisoners who are given responsibilities, and that's part of kind of helping them. Is they notice that they are responsible, and they give them responsibilities, and that's kind of so he becomes a trustee in these prisons. Now, when he's a slave in Potiphar's house, he's not a trustee. He is what we would call a steward. He is given reign over everything. All Potiphar had to worry about was what he was going to eat for dinner, and everything else he just let Joseph be the administrator to the household. Yeah. Now, what I thought was interesting, there's a verse that talks about that God blesses Potiphar's house and blesses the jailer in the prison because he was with Joseph. Yeah, that's cool. And a lot of times when we're in a job and it's a tough situation and God is with us and blessing us, we have a function of blessing even non-believers. God blesses non-believers through us and our service to them. So as an employee, how do you stack up as an employee, as a Christian employee? Does your boss say, man, I can trust him that when I ask him to do something, he does it, and I don't have to worry about it because he is a follower of Jesus? And I may not be, but I see that he is, and that God blesses him because of it, and that's a good thing for me. I've had that when I worked in television. I had that as a situation with my non-believing bosses.
That's one thing. You know, I work in ministry now. That's one thing I miss. You know, I worked at a bank before I started working in ministry, and that's actually one of the things I do miss about working at the bank is the relationships that you have day in and day out with lost people. You know, and being able to be an example of how of how hard you work. And I can still be that example here at church. People can get bad attitudes. People can be frustrated. And so, we can still be that example of how to do things even here in ministry. But it was definitely a lot more visible when I was around lost people.
Yeah. And, for 30 years, God gave me a career. I didn't love the career, but it was a great opportunity to shine a light in the middle of darkness. And and sometimes that's what God calls us to do. We're not doing what we would like to do, but we're doing what God has us doing, and we could call that suffering. But in the midst of that, we take the idea that God is with us, and we work faithfully, and He blesses. Now, along with success, something else happens. What happens in Joseph's life while he's serving Potiphar? That's really a result of his success.
Yeah, it's this crazy story with the wife. I mean, it just seems like, it seems like she's throwing herself at him every time Potiphar leaves the house.
Yeah, and with success comes temptation.
Yep.
And Joseph really toes the line in fact, he says something very interesting. Did you notice when he talks to Potiphar's wife and he says, how could I have an affair with you? Potiphar has trusted me with everything, except obviously you as his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says something very interesting, and this gives us a good perspective on temptation. He said, why would I do that and sin against God?
Yeah.
He doesn't say, how could I do that and wrong or sin against Potiphar?
Mm-hmm.
He has the perspective that if he sins in the context of serving Potiphar, that is a sin against God. And so what helps him resist that sin is not fear of Potiphar or even friendly attitude towards Potiphar.
Mm-hmm.
What helps him resist that temptation is the perspective. This would be a wrong against God.
Yeah.
And he does something that we're told to do in 1 Thessalonians. It talks about fleeing temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that same word. What Joseph does with Potiphar is he flees.
Yeah, he does. And, it talks in there about Joseph being handsome in form and appearance. And the way he talks about this kind of temptation, I don't know if I've ever thought about it before, but Potiphar's wife, I would think, was probably a good-looking lady. Like the way he talks about it here is that it's actually a temptation that that this is, and so it's not like Potiphar's wife is this 89-year-old lady go away, lady. But this is a real temptation.
Yeah, picture a trophy wife.
Yeah,
attractive, sexually active. Obviously, because she tries to seduce Joseph a number of times, and I think it's interesting here, and I have a theory. What is Potiphar's reaction when she concocts this story about, and she's kind of blaming Potiphar because she basically says the Hebrew slave you brought into the house, has wronged me. What is Potiphar's reaction? I think this is very interesting.
I mean, he believes her and, throws Joseph into prison.
All right. Now, I think that is debatable.
Oh,
It says after she tells the story, what is his reaction? He's angry. Potiphar. I'm talking about Potiphar's reaction.
yeah. It says his anger was kindled.
All right. Now the question is this, and this is something for us to think about. Joseph has been his faithful right-hand man, and he has watched Joseph serve him faithfully in the house.
Yeah.
He has given Joseph tons of responsibility. He has treated him very well. And all of a sudden, there's this accusation from his wife. And I'm not sure whether Potiphar was angry at Joseph or at the wife for making up the story. Because if Potiphar has a feeling that Joseph is a person of integrity and that God is with him, then this story wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
That Joseph tries to rape her. It just wouldn't make sense. But it would if he says, I suspect my wife is up to something, and his anger would be kindled at his wife. And so what is his reaction towards Joseph? He puts him in prison, right?
Right.
What could he have done?
You could have killed him, right?
Could have killed him. And if you would have thought that Potiphar believed this was a rape attempt on his wife,
Yeah.
he would have just killed Joseph.
Right.
Just had him killed for the offense. But I think because Potiphar suspected that his wife is up to shenanigans, because we do show our true colors, and his wife was trying to seduce one of the young. Who knows if she had acted that way?
She had done it before.
Yeah, who knows? But I think it's interesting that Joseph is protected by God even in the accusation, and that Potiphar does not react as bad as he could have.
Yeah.
And so I have a theory that Potiphar is angry because his wife is taking away a great servant.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point there. It's definitely debatable. We won't know the answer for sure.
No.
It's not something we can ever come with, but that's a good thing to ponder and wonder. That's a good theory.
Yeah, and sometimes when we're wronged in our job, for example, when somebody accuses us of doing something wrong, our bosses know. And even if we're punished, it may be a punishment that God is involved with making it lighter than it could have been. And that's this whole thing of just God being with us. And he was with Joseph in that there was a death penalty for attempted rape, especially attempted rape of your master who owns you. And he would have been well within his rights to have Joseph executed, and yet he puts him in prison.
Cool.
So I like that little episode there, that all of a sudden he's in prison, and he could have said, "Whew, I'm in prison. I could have lost my life there."
Yeah.
With that accusation.
And we find out as we go through the story that he's in prison for a very important purpose.
And for a reason. That's right. And this is important, I think, as a story of Joseph, that our suffering, God never wastes suffering.
Yeah.
He has a purpose. And he allows us to suffer. He's with us in our suffering and comforts us. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 talks about he is the God of all comfort who comforts us when we're suffering.
Yeah.
But he doesn't waste the suffering. There is a purpose. And what we see here is a maturing in the way Joseph handles his dream. Remember back with his brothers, he had a dream, and brothers and his father even. He had a dream and immediately spouted off about it.
Yeah.
Okay? He wasn't very discerning. Well, as we see a maturing Joseph, we really see him handling his dreams in a much better way, and the interpretation of other people's dreams.
Yep.
As a gift from God, and he's cherishing that and really husbanding that gift in service of the Lord.
These sufferings that he goes to, they get him where he needs to be and he wouldn't have gotten there without the sufferings. And I know that's true in my life. The seasons that I've gone through suffering, I wouldn't be where I am now without those seasons of suffering.
That's hugely important for us to remember,
Mm-hmm.
because while we're suffering, while Joseph is doing this and going through this, wrongfully accused, wrongfully put in jail, he's in jail for a number of years. He's in jail for quite a while. What would have been easy for Joseph to do as far as his attitude?
Could have given up, could have been depressed, he could have sulked. I mean, he could have just laid in prison all day and done nothing.
And he could have been angry
Yeah.
at God.
He's making the best of his situation that he's in because he's being successful.
Yeah, and I think in this idea of the Lord being with you, there's this idea of you're maintaining a fellowship with him.
Yeah.
And it's not like the Lord is with you and you're off by yourself sulking.
Right.
I've got this perspective that the Lord is with me, and I'm going to keep an attitude that even in the midst of this suffering, the Lord is with me.
Yeah.
And the Lord will make me successful at serving even when I'm being wronged.
Yeah.
And that's a huge lesson to learn. And it's so easy for us to get angry when we're wronged.
Right.
Instead of letting that anger flare up and really lead to sin.
Yeah.
Remember the verse that says, be angry, but do not sin. Well, that's this idea of we can go, oh man, I've been wronged, but I'm not going to go to the route of anger where it burns me up and it affects my attitude.
Yep.
That's so easy to happen. And I see that as a huge lesson in this story. And as we look at this story of Joseph and let's call it the prison years, okay?
Right.
He's
Yeah.
wrongly accused, and he suffers for years in prison. He ministers to the cupbearer, and you're going to get released. That comes true. And we're going to pick up next week on this idea of what happens when the cupbearer does finally remember. What is Joseph's attitude through that? And we're going to see that when we come back next week. I think this is really an interesting study of suffering.
Yeah.
For us and for Joseph. A lot of lessons here for us.
Yeah. I love the story of Joseph. I love where he ends up in Genesis 50. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And we're seeing that throughout this entire story of these things that happened to him.
Yeah.
God's reweaving it to what he's wanting to have done.
And next week, we're going to end up with what I think is the major event in Joseph's life. We've kind of looked at all of these events in Joseph's life, but I think there is the major event. We're going to talk about that next week. In the meantime, hope this was a blessing to you guys on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. If this was a blessing, subscribe and hit the like button. I call that the bless button because every time you hit like, it blesses us, and we appreciate it. And I'd love to hear your comments. Comments about this whole thing of suffering and God having a plan in our suffering and how to continue to serve even when we're suffering. I'd love to hear from you. I'll respond to those comments, and we will come back and see you next week, and we'll finish up in the book of Genesis. In the meantime, God bless you.